In this lecture, I'm going to show you how to set up a custom Blender startup file. I'm using one right now. I find this to be helpful in some ways, not absolutely necessary, but it definitely reduces some of the redundancy while working with Blender. Okay, so in order to get started, why don't I first show you how to restore your factory settings. So in other words, if you go to File, Load Factory Settings, what this is going to do is any custom startup file that you have, it's going to override it and put it back to the way it was when Blender was first installed on your computer. In order to do this, just click on Load Factory Settings. If you move your mouse away before you click on this button, that pop-up window will go away, okay? So you won't actually have done anything. You'll have to go in here, click on Load Factory Settings, and then click again on this link in order to actually make that happen. All right, so this is back to the factory settings, and the first thing I'm going to want to do is delete all of these objects. I don't use any of these lamps or cameras. I don't use the cube. I don't need them. Just going to get rid of them, okay? They get in the way a lot. You don't use them. Unity doesn't use them. You're not going to be doing any rendering in Blender because you're doing all your rendering in Unity. Just doesn't make sense to have them, so let's just get rid of those. The next thing I'm going to want to do is turn on backface culling. I'm going to explain that in the next lecture, but for now, I'll just show you how to turn it on. So click N on your keyboard. This is the properties sheet. Now the properties sheet has a lot of stuff on it, but what we're interested in right now is the shading section and backface culling. So just go down there and turn that on, and then we can close the properties sheet by just clicking on N again. Those are two things that I highly recommend doing, and the rest is kind of just personal preference. So at least do those two things. And I'll show you how to save your settings right now. Hit Control U to bring up this pop-up. Again, if you move your mouse outside of this area, it'll make that pop-up go away and it won't save that setting. So what you need to do is Control U, keep your mouse in that general area, click on the link, and now everything is saved. Just to verify that everything is saved, let's go and close Blender. You don't have to do this. I'm just showing you to prove that it was saved. I'm going to hit OK. Blender is now closed, so I'm going to reopen Blender. Get rid of the splash screen, and you'll notice that there are no objects in the scene, and the backface culling is turned on just the way I left it. I'm going to go and improve this a little bit more to my personal liking, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the things that you can do with this, okay? So we got those two things taken care of. Another thing that we can do is kind of clean up this. There's a lot of stuff here that we don't use with, as video game developers, and I'm certainly not going to use any of this stuff for this course. You can pick and choose what you want to keep, but if you want to get rid of anything, all you need to do is load that screen and then click on this X to delete whatever screen is actively being used right now. So delete that one. I'm going to use animation, so I'll keep that. Let's get rid of compositing. I'll keep default. Let's get rid of game logic. Let's get rid of motion tracking. Don't need scripting. I'm going to use UV editing. I'm not going to use video editing, at least, again, not for this course. So I'm going to keep those three things on. I might edit some of this stuff, so I'm going to close these panels because this is actually going to be saved in my startup. The next time I start up Blender, not only are these screens going to be deleted, but anything I do inside of each one of these screens, such as collapsing these panels, zooming in here, maybe changing my perspective over here. Let's go to ortho view, and I'm going to set it up exactly the way I like it, which is pretty much like this. Let's go back to default, and let's see what else can we change. I'll do the same thing over here. Let's go to ortho view, and what I did was I pushed 1 on my numeric keypad, which is front ortho view. I hit 8 on my numeric keypad twice to put it at a certain angle. Probably be better if I put an object in there just to show you what that angle is. So what we're looking at is the top and the front view of a 3D object. And then I hit the number 6 3 times to put it at a 45-degree angle. And this makes it look kind of like an isometric 3D object. That's my personal preference. You don't have to do this, but I'm just kind of showing you that this is one of the things that gets saved with your custom startup file. I don't need the cube. I just created it to demonstrate that, but I will use it for another thing. Let's go into edit mode on the cube. And in edit mode, you might decide, like right now, I like the way it is. If you zoom in, you can see with this button turned off, you can see through the cube to the other side. You can see the geometry that should be blocked by the faces of this cube. If you like this, then you can turn that off. If you don't like it, make sure that that's turned on. This is limit selection to visible so that you don't actually see through it. I personally don't like to see through the cube, so I'm going to turn it on so that it prevents that from happening. However, notice in the UV editing window that is turned off by default. So in Blender, the default factory settings has it turned off here and it's turned on in the default window. But I want it to be the same on both screens, so I'm going to turn it on over here as well. I'm going to go back to object mode so that I can delete this cube. I don't need the cube. One of the things that I like to do is get rid of this little scroll bar right here. So I'm going to change the width of this panel a little bit. I leave this panel open all the time. I'm going to keep this shelf on, but I'm going to keep this one turned off. I don't need that on most of the time. Let's look at the UV editing window again. Again, I have this shelf off. I have this shelf off. If you wanted to open those up, you can do it manually by clicking on the plus sign. You can drag this to close it, or you can hit N to open up the right-hand side panel, which is called the property shelf, or you can hit T to open the left-hand side, which is called the tool shelf. And the same thing goes over here, N for the right, T for the left. And you can go through those quickly and easily with the keyboard. Good stuff to know. And I think this is pretty much it. I'm happy with all of these settings, so I'm going to go ahead and hit Control U and save that startup file by clicking on the pop-up. Now it's all done. So just to kind of prove that all of this stuff did actually save, I'm going to go and close Blender and reopen it, and you can see that all the things that I just customized are now saved. Every single time I open up Blender from now on, it's always going to be this view. It's always going to be an ortho view. Of course, I can change it. I'm not stuck there. I can change my view. I can change back to perspective. But if I mess around with all this stuff and maybe change that, or make this wider, or create an object, or whatever it is that I do, and close Blender and reopen it again, it'll be right back to where it was the last time I saved the custom startup file. That's basically what we're trying to do here, okay? And everything is exactly where I like it. So go in there and play around with these settings. If you get to the point where you feel like you messed up and you need to start over, remember the beginning of this lecture where you can load the factory settings, and that will restore everything back to the way it was when Blender first shipped out. And have fun with this. Hopefully you'll get this thing set up exactly the way you like. And when you get it all wired up and working to your own personal preference, come back. I'll see you in the next lecture.